implies that the elasticity of demand for money with respect to what? With respect to income. That's what it is. Real demand for money is a function of YR, the real income. So you can estimate the things. I have done many equations and many people have done that. So it was very high in those days. So the rate of growth in income multiplied by the elasticity of demand for money plus an acceptable level of inflation. What is an acceptable level of inflation? I think that it may differ from what you are saying to what I am saying. But we had estimated at that time, please remember, today we are talking about an inflation targeting 4% plus or minus 2%. We said in the Chakravarti Committee report that the acceptable level of inflation is 4%. And we have given an explanation as to why we think that is an acceptable level of inflation. So basically, at that time, the rate of growth in income was never exceeding 5%. So 5 into 2 plus 4, 14% is the rate of growth in money supply that we should do. And then both RBI and government should agree to it and set a level of net RBI credit to government, because that is what finally decides the reserve money growth and therefore the money supply. Because that also implies, as you can clearly see, there is a fixed relationship between reserve money and money supply. Because if you say 15% is the rate of growth in money supply, you can arrive at what the money supply growth should be. And then the reserve money expansion should be consistent with that, and therefore that should be a relationship between reserve money and money supply, and therefore you can derive the reserve money. Then you can then say, all right, this is all what I can give you, the RBI can give to the government for financing the debt, and let us go through it. This is the flexible monetary targeting monetary supply. This actually was a good compromise, but the government in principle accepted this, but in practice violated it. Because even after 1981, the government continued to borrow in a big way, and all of that ended up in the crisis of 89-90. By the time of 89-90, we had a high fiscal deficit, we had a high monetized deficit, we had a high current account deficit. All of this contributed to a situation in which we had to face a crisis of 1991. As you know, it can be shown that a high fiscal deficit automatically spills over into a high current account deficit. Basically, if you're living beyond your means, then ultimately it has to come from somewhere, and therefore it will become a current account deficit. It can be shown the twin deficits are really one, the two are interrelated. So by 1989-90, before that there was something that I will skip. I mean, I think what we did on money market developments and so on and so forth. That's many things that you talk about today about certificates of deposit, commercial paper, all these were introduced. So we were trying our best to make changes, but we still had an administered structure of interest rate. You must understand what is meant by an administered structure of interest rates. The Reserve Bank of India determined the deposit rates. All deposit rates, up to 3 months, up to 6 months, up to 1 year, up to 2 years, up to 3 years, everything was determined by the Reserve Bank of India. And the lending rates were also prescribed by the Reserve Bank of India. You can ask them, what does the bank do? Well, the bank takes the deposits and then lends it in. And the lending rate structure was so complicated. If you ask me at any time, what is the lending rate for this? I will say, wait, let me take the notebook and tell you what it is. It ran to 5 pages. For example, if credit was given against cotton in Coimbatore, there was one rate. If credit was given against cotton in Ahmedabad, it was a different rate. So we went into such details and we had an administrative structure of interest rate. So that is the situation at that time. But within this, we tried to make modifications in the money market structure. There was a Bagul committee which made recommendations and we implemented it. And I set up also what is called the Discount and Finance House, of which I was the first chairman, and tried to introduce the treasury bill system into the country. And in 1990, I can tell you that's a major change that we did in the midst of all the crisis. In September 1990, I remember we collapsed all the lending rates into one page, and we said there will be only 5 rates of interest, and brought everything under 5 heads. But anyway, that's a different matter. Let me come back to the crisis of 1989-90. At least this much you must have read somewhere, the crisis of 1991, which led to the reforms later on. By 1989-90, as I said, the current account deficit was in excess of 2.5% of GDP. And at that time came the Iraq-Kuwait war. And the oil prices again shot up to a very high level. And the current account deficit started rising. But please remember, it is not because of Iraq-Kuwait war that the whole thing happened. Already the situation was precarious. On top of it came, it is only the last straw that broke the camel's back. So in August 1990 or September 1990, yes, in August 1990, we wrote a letter to the government of India saying that we must approach IMF and get some relief. But at that time, as you know, the political situation was also in a flux. In 1990, August, September, VP Singh government was in power, and Madhu Dandavate was the finance minister. Neither of them wanted to go to Washington. No, they physically went to Washington. They did not want to go to IMF to get in. And despite the urging, strong letters, and I had spoken many times, they didn't budge. And the situation started deteriorating. The deterioration is not only because of the high level of current account deficit, but also because of the difficulty in financing that current account deficit. Because, I do not know, this at least you must remember, in 2013, we had a balance of payments problem. But in 2012 also we had a high current account deficit, but it did not bother. But we were able to get enough capital inflows into the country to finance the current account deficit. The next year we couldn't, but in the first year we did. But in 1990, the biggest problem was the difficulty in financing the current account deficit. What happened? Two things. NRI deposits was one of the important sources of financing our current account deficit. The NRIs at that time did not come to our help. In fact, they withdrew deposits. So the position became even more precarious. Second, much of the oil imports that we make is also done through what are called acceptance credits. The acceptance credit is a short-term paper. It will run for about 3 weeks, so 3 months at the maximum, and it will have to be renewed. What happened in that particular time was that the short-term paper could not be rolled over. Therefore, we had a problem of the NRIs withdrawing deposits. Now, acceptance credit not being capable of being rolled over, and the current account deficit was rising. In December 1990, India's reserves was equal only to 3 weeks of India's imports. We are drawn to that situation. It was in that situation, by that time, the Chandrasekhar government has come. VP Singh government has fallen. Chandrasekhar government said, all right, you go to the fund. So when I asked him, Then he said, what option have you left me? I said, yes, there is no option, we have to go. So in December 1990, I went to the fund. Myself and Deepak Naya went to the fund to negotiate for the funds. Now, that is all right. I mean, I think we had to do it. And at that time, the IMF itself had introduced what is called a compensatory financing facility. The compensating financing facility is financial support where when import prices rise very high and the crude oil, the increase in the crude oil price is a classic example of that. Therefore, they were willing to give. And the conditionalities attached to the compensatory financing facility is not very high. It's almost given. But then, what we wanted was the compensatory financing facility plus an extended fund facility. First, we started negotiating with them for that. Then, it was at that time the question arose that when we went asking for money from various places, from private people, from other central banks and all that. One question that they asked us, you want money, you have so much gold, why are you not doing anything with it? Then we told them that these gold are reserves of the country. I mean, we can't, I mean, there is a lot of gold in India, but that is all in the private hands. I mean, we can't take them. The only gold that is available to us is what is kept in the Reserve Bank of India as reserves. So we said that these are reserves. But then they said, why can't you use them? You should, instead of coming to us, you should use what you have. But we have a problem using the gold that is part of the reserves. Then began this whole question about what do we do with the gold that we have? Whether we can pledge that gold. I have written on that. You can see that long article that I have written about that. Namely, how to do this. First of all, if the Reserve Bank of India had to borrow, under the Reserve Bank of India Act, it can borrow only from another central bank. It cannot borrow from anybody else. Therefore, we had to find out which central bank is willing to lend. Finally, Bank of England and Bank of Japan agreed to give us $440 million. But then they said, you pledge your gold. We were willing to pledge gold, but then they said, no, that gold should come out of India. Strict lenders. So they said that we will give you, but you get the gold out of India and keep it in the vault in the Bank of England. And then when you return, you can take it back. We had no other choice at that time. So we really decided we should go ahead. The political system at that time was also very agreeable. But I must also say one thing about these negotiations that we were doing in Washington. You know, we were in Washington negotiating for this loan. We were agreeing and all that. But you remember, I do not know whether you recall or not, in February 1991, the budget was not presented. The Congress party, which was supporting Chandrasekhar government, withdrew the support. Therefore, the budget could not be presented. I was in Washington that day, and we had gone for the negotiations. And by the night time there, the Chandrasekhar government has fallen. So next morning, we go there, and then these guys are asking, with what government are we negotiating? So I told them, look, you are negotiating with the right kind of people. It is for us to tell our government what we should do. Let us finish what we have to do and then see how it will be accomplished. So these are all the things that were happening. And it was at that time, this gold thing was also being discussed. But let me say, the problems are enormous in shipping gold from India to UK. We were shipping 50 tons of gold. 50 tons of gold in those days cost, the value was about $400 million. And so first of all the gold that we had were not in proper form. Queen Victoria coins and something else, some things, and so on and so forth. It is not what they call London good delivery. London good delivery means it must be in blocks and with a stamp on it and so on and so forth. So we told them that these are good gold coins. Yes, we agree, but they are not in London good delivery. So, do you believe it? We sent it to London, converted it into the London good delivery, and until then they said we will give you 90% of the value. Then the balance 10% came after it was converted into the London good delivery. The other thing is how to send that gold. First, in small quantities, we sent it through the normal aircraft as a baggage. But then after 2 or 3 trips, the airlines came to us and said, no, we can't take it. People are suspecting. We are running a big risk. We will not do it. Then what to do? We chartered a flight. And the flight was in Bombay Airport. And we were shipping on that day something like 35 tons of gold. 35 tons of gold, but traveling from the walls, from the Reserve Bank of India building to the airport. And every crossing traffic signal it passes, the phone call will come. We have passed. And you do not believe it. At one particular point on the traffic signal, the security vans had crossed the light, but the gold was on the other side of the light. So then for 5 minutes we were really we did not know what to do. But then finally it went. And some very keen journalist who later on became a friend of mine was also watching something going and all that, and watched the plane also. And then they said, let me say, it was not our intention to hide it from the people. We cannot. It's a balance sheet item. We cannot, if you have pledged the gold, we have to state it. But what we wanted was that let us announce to the country after it has reached London. That was only the thing. But the newspaper fellow, who was very nosy, found out, and by the time it left in the morning, it had left India, it came on the newspapers. RBI hiding things, this, that, and what many things, and it came. But then it had gone. But the whole point is that we get to do things which is consistent with the law. The RBI Act permits the Reserve Bank of India to keep a certain percentage of gold outside India. It is there in the Act. Therefore, we were quite abiding by the law as it is in the Act. But then it should not be in the issue department. It has to be transferred from the issue department to the banking department and then sent. So this is, in a way, what happened. But let me tell you, very interesting. We were negotiating all these things. It all took time. So from February, by the time we could ship the gold, the new government has come. The Narasimha Rao government has come. Now, do we take to the new government and ask them whether they will give permission or not? I can tell you another interesting thing. You know, in the customs, when you want to send something to another country, you have to declare there what you are sending, you know. Now what is this? If I have to declare there the commodity that is going is gold, then you don't require a newspaper man to say it. anybody in the customs will be able to say it. So we had to take permission from the government of India to say that an object not to be declared or something like that. So we did all of that. But the point really is, as I was saying, that the new government has come. And the new government, I talked to Dr. Manmohan Singh, and the new government said, no, you don't ask us anything. You do what you like. Because you have taken the permission or you have done anything, it's your responsibility, you do it. We will not come either way. We will not say don't do it. But don't ask our permission. So the gold went. That is how it went. But as you all know, in 6 months we were able to repay. And we did not bring back the gold. It's still there. Because it is legally allowed. And it is always useful to keep some quantity outside. So that is one part of it. And by, as I said, by February, March, we had done at least one compensatory financing facility which enabled us to tide over the immediate crisis. We were negotiating for the what we call the extended fund facility. And then came June end, with the new government, Narasimha Rao government, came into power. And when the Narasimha Rao government came into power, the question arose, what do we do about the exchange rate of the rupee? Should we not devalue the rupee? You have a serious balance of payments problem. And obviously one solution to the balance of payment problem is to devalue the currency. And almost everybody was hinting at it. But I must say that I have written and I will write also that the IMF at that particular point in time was quite cooperative. When they saw the problems coming out of many things, but they were strict about what they wanted. But on devaluation itself, in my own memory, I have been trying to recall everything that happened at that time. My own memory is that they did not say that you do it, otherwise we will not help you or something like that, but they indicated their own preference, which was to devalue the rupee. So finally we decided. I don't know whether you have read about this or not. I have also written on that. We devalued the rupee by about 17% or 18%. How? That was another thing. It was decided that it had to be devalued. And at that time, the Narasimha government was actually a minority government. And we had to take it to the president, who was Rangarajan at that time as a president, and tell him that we had to do it. He had his own misgivings and so on. But we told him that this has to be done. Then finally it was decided that we will do it. And the big change that we made at that time was, it was not a devaluation that was announced by the government. Previous devaluations were announced by the government. As you know, that the exchange rate of the rupee has been determined by the Reserve Bank of India every morning. It is also one of the administered prices. I used to do it every morning at 9:30. So that is the way it used to be done. For 9 years or 10 years I did that every morning at 9:30, the exchange rate of the rupee. What we decided was that we will do it as part of our daily adjustment of the exchange rate. So, and it was decided to do it in 2 stages. Watch what happens at the end of the first. Then if everything is quiet, we go ahead and do the second one. Do you know the code name for this? Hop, skip and jump. So this is what we decided. That first we'll hop, then skip and then jump. So on July 1, I announced, and it was devalued by about 7 or 8%. The whole market was in uproar. Is there a mistake in communication? Is the rupee paise or is it really rupees or whatever it is? Then it was done. Then after that, what happened? There was a lot of talk. And everybody thought that we will devalue the rupee to something very high. And we were supposed to do it after 3 days. At the end of 2 days, on July 3rd, again I was going to do it. In the meanwhile, I understand that Narasimha Rao developed cold feet. And he was a minority government. And there were many people within his own party who did not like the idea of devaluation. But I was not available to anybody. And finally, at 9:30 on July 3rd, Dr. Manmohan Singh telephoned and asked, what is the situation? I said, I have jumped. He said, fine, let's. So Narasimha Rao was upset that despite his wish, it was done. But that was what was done as a devaluation. Let me come very quickly to the most important changes that happened between 92 and 97, and then raise some issues which are of importance in monetary policy, not only then, but at all times. I regard the 92 to 97, or 91 to 97, as an important period, not only in terms of reforms, but also in terms of what we had to do. I think there are 3 sets of reforms that I will tell you, which were critically important. One related to monetary policy, or monetary structure. The other related to the banking system. And the third related to the exchange rate system. In the case of the monetary system, I do not know whether you have read in the course of your textbook the automatic monetization of the fiscal deficit. There was an understanding between the Government of India and the Reserve Bank, an agreement signed, which said that whenever the cash balances of the Government of India went below a particular level, they can replace it by issuing ad hoc treasury bills in favor of the Reserve Bank and collect the money. Looks innocuous. But it means that any deficit of Government of India can be automatically monetized. Because what will happen? Deficit means cash balances will go down. Then you can replenish it by doing it. It was my desire all along. I have been writing on it. In fact, my article on this predates the 92 decision, that this should be phased out. And Manmohan Singh agreed to it, and this was phased out. But it has to be done over a period of time, not immediately. But by 1996, it was phased out, and therefore automatic monetization of the fiscal deficit came to an end. And that's an important change. And the second important change was that the government had to go to the market and borrow at market-determined rates of interest. It was done through auction, treasury bills, bonds, and all that. Until then, as I told you, the big thing was the SLR, right? The 38% went to it. Therefore, the government not only borrowed more, but also borrowed at a lower rate. It's the contrary to the thing. If you borrow more, you should have to pay more interest rate. But they borrowed more and at a low interest rate. Now what happened was that 38% statutory liquidity ratio was brought down by me from 38% to the statutory minimum in the Banking Companies Act to 25% over a period of 3 to 4 years. And the government actually had to borrow, go to the market and borrow at market determined rates. What is the offshoot of this?